Hello everyone and welcome back to Timberborn! This is episode 4 of the Haunted Hollow series. In the last episode we continued to expand our colony. As you can see, we have a lot of trees that are grown up now. So we're doing fantastic on wood storage. We also started working on getting a smelter produced. But I saw one of the comments that you guys left in the last episode, and it was mentioning that we should probably move this all the way up here. But we can put a water wheel in right here and then not worry about having to power it with Beaver power for now. And I actually think that is a fantastic idea. So we're going to place one of these down right here and then get a water wheel set up. And we'll want to make sure that we prioritize this first, and then this will be built second. We can actually go ahead and remove this for now, since we don't need to double up on smelters just yet. And we can also remove the power wheel that's right here. We will be getting an engine at some point. And since we haven't constructed it at all, we're not actually losing out on any resources. And then we'll also want to remove these two storages and shift them up here so they're a little bit closer. And as day 5 of cycle 4 rolls around, you can see we actually have an unemployed beaver, so we can unpause this forester. Although, is that actually the best spot we could put him in? It looks like basically all the trees are already planted, so we might actually want to leave this paused and then start looking for another job that we can squeeze him into. We can squeeze a few more inventors that's in right here. We'll make sure we prioritize at least a couple of them. And then with all the resources that we have, I think it's worth squeezing in a hauling post over here. This will be a perfect job that we can fit excess beavers into. And one of you guys also left a comment on the most recent episode of this series about looking at another YouTuber's Let's Play. And I went and looked at the episode that was pertinent to the first Badtide. And it seemed like for this lower level, it only spread a few tiles in. It wasn't too bad. I think it will probably take out about this amount of crops. Most likely on this side of the path, maybe a little bit more. And then it was something similar up top. So we will have some food that should survive during the Badtide, but we'll need to make sure that we can harvest enough. One thing we can also focus on is getting a second farmhouse up here. Looks like we have our first water wheel that has been created. So now all we have to do is get the smelter constructed. And it looks like we have plenty of resources, plus we still have some that are down here. And we're also doing much better on science than I was anticipating. So we are going to unlock the builder's hut and then make this the highest priority building, since we have quite a few buildings that we want to construct. In between all of these, I think it would take just a little bit too long if we left it to just the district center. Although I'm actually going to pause this real quick and we're going to slow everything down, because I already forgot about the fact that we want to place some irrigation barriers along here. So we're going to move all these buildings except for this one. We can move this when we actually get some treated planks up and running. Space is a little bit of an issue. I think we can fit some around here. I would like to have this be a production facility, since we only have a small area right here. We can always fit a couple buildings over here, so we can get the builder's hut and the hauling post set up. Once again, high prioritize the builder's hut. Taking a look at the smelter up here, it requires 200 HP to power it. Unfortunately, this water wheel is only providing 48, so we'll need to go around the backside and then place down some platforms, and then place down a couple more of these water wheels. Looks like we have the builder's hut that is up and running now, so we do have a couple more free jobs. And that should help the construction of everything go much faster now that we've doubled the amount of builders that we have. But as soon as they finish building the smelter, this is one of the more dangerous jobs, so we'll need to make sure we have a medical bed up and running. And we do have 2, which is good news. And hopefully the beavers don't injure themselves too much, but we can always add a few medical beds down the road since they are fairly inexpensive to build. And then thinking about the Badtide when it comes through here, there's not going to be any water to irrigate this, so I'm going to want to fill this small area up with some water so we can get a fluid dump placed down right here. And this should be a good little area to help keep at least some of these trees irrigated. And we have our first smelter up and running. He's only running at 1/4 of the efficiency that he could be, so it's going to be slow and steady for this guy. So that means it takes him 8 working hours in order for him to produce 1 metal block. That's only 2 per day. That's not great. We're going to bump the priority up for these, that way he can run a little bit more efficiently. I'm hoping these 2 water wheels are more than just 48 HP. I'm guessing that since this is on the left side, that the water probably moves a little bit faster through the middle of the stream. Ooh, and we have our farmhouse that's been created. Let's make sure we have a pass, so now they should be able to get in here. And now we have 8 vacant jobs. It does look like they also finished building the hauling post. And taking a look ahead, I want to get the wood workshop unlocked. That is 800 science and it requires 250 HP. which means that if we want to power it with the large power wheel, we'll basically need all 4 of the beavers to work in here just to power that one building. That's not as efficient as I would like, and then the engine is only 400 science to unlock, so we already have enough for both of those. So we're going to unlock the engine first, and then we'll get that placed down right here and unlock the wood workshop, and then have that constructed right next to it. And as the beavers begin the next day of work, it is day 10, but their well-being is actually pretty low. It's only at 8 right now. We can do a few things to try and bump that up. One of those is look at some decorations. They require a bit of science for some of these, so we'll have to be conscientious of what we unlock. But getting a lantern placed behind the campfire and adjacent to some of these houses is perfect. And then we can also unlock a shrub for only 20 science. It looks like our water pumpers are getting pretty close to maxing out our water storage. So let's bump this up to higher priority for this one medium water tank. That way we can have a good amount of water stored up. Since our beaver population is exploding, we have 64 beavers in this district right now. And so they're going to have a huge demand for some water. We also need to make sure that our food production is keeping up with that. Looks like we have a good amount of cassavas that are ready to be picked, but it might be that we are just running a little bit short on the production side. Let's make sure we prioritize this building by haulers. That'll help this guy run a little bit more efficiency instead of running around. And it looks like we have 3 of the 5 haulers who are working here. We still have a couple vacant spots, but as we have more and more of these children that grow up, which we are up to 10 right now, but as these children grow up, they will start to fill in some of these spots. And so between all these 3 water wheels, it looks like they're producing just under 200 HP. And so this guy is running at 87% efficiency, much better than 24. And all the metal blocks that he is producing are going directly into this engine. We are at 9 out of 20 right now. And this wood workshop is actually coming together pretty quickly, just running a bit short on gears at the moment. Something that we should have unlocked a while ago is the showers. It's only 50 science and it's fairly inexpensive to construct. So we can place a few of these down right here. And then when the morning rolls around, we'll have some more well-being points for these guys. And we got a little lucky. In 3 days we have a drought approaching, not a bad tide once again. So that gives us a bit more time in order to construct the wood workshop and this engine right here. And then taking a step back, as we want to expand this colony, we'll need to make sure that we have enough food and water for the beavers. Food is going to be a little tricky since we have to use green space, and we're currently using almost all the green space that we have available to us. There is some more under here, although this is powered by water through the rivers, and we don't really want to depend on that since if a bad tide comes through, all of the green space right here will be eliminated. And as you can see on the backside, there is going to be some contamination that will spread into the land. And at this stage we do want to create our own green space. The problem is there's not a whole lot of flat areas. In the bowls there is a little bit of space, but it's fairly far away. And then up top it's just not quite as flat and smooth. Now one thing we could do is you can see the water goes through this way. There is a little channel over here. And then it looks like it spills into this bad water spawner. So if we could somehow make a diversion system that pushes the bad water up and then goes around here, we could dam this off and then use some dynamite to blast away the terrain over here. That could be a way that we prevent any bad water from coming through our river over here, but that would have to be a system that we implement after the initial bad tide, since I don't think we can unlock the explosives factory and then also get some dynamite unlocked and have all that constructed and placed down before this next bad tide comes through. It looks like they finished constructing the engine, so we had all the metal blocks that we needed for this. We're just a little bit short on gears at the moment, and we're actually almost completely maxed out on planks. Gears are definitely something that we want to be stocked up on. So what I'm going to do is shift this over by 1 space, and then we're actually going to remove this. It's going to be a little inefficient in terms of moving the resources to and from this location, but we are going to place down another gear workshop and then high prioritize this since we still need 20 gears in order to complete the wood workshop. And then we can also start collecting some of these resources that are spewing about. And we once again have a homeless beaver. We are pretty maxed out on the space over here. We'll have to start going 3-dimensional if we want to get some more houses over here. Our beaver population is in a pretty good spot, so we'll pause one of these breeding pods for now. And as you can see, we have a lot of beavers standing around. It means we don't have enough activities for them to do during their non-work hours. So it might be time to start thinking about how we want to revamp the area in order to maximize the amount of activities they can do, and then also fitting in some three-dimensional aspects. On the bright side, the beaver's well-being is bumping up. We're up to 11, so it is an improvement from the recent episode. What we're going to do is rearrange the buildings we have right here. We have these storages, but most of them are pretty small, and it's not really the best use of the space right here. And then we can relocate all of those storages into some larger ones over here. And then we'll have to move these rooftop terraces temporarily. And then once we start building our storages up this way, we'll have some space over here that we can move these campfires to. And that should also free up some space in order for us to start building up instead of sideways. And the drought has officially started. It is 6 days long, the longest one we've experienced yet. So we'll need to make sure we pause all these water pumpers. And I'm feeling pretty good about this drought. We have 3 of these medium water tanks that are completely full. We have not started working on the 4th one yet, but that's okay. We shifted our storages about a little bit over here. We have a lot of piles. We don't have quite as many of the warehouses, but in order to create the large warehouse, it requires 250 science, which we have enough of that, but it takes quite a bit of wood and planks. So we're going to hold off on that just for now, because at the moment we're just basically placing metal blocks, planks, and wood in all these. We don't quite need all of the storage. In fact, I'm actually just going to get rid of these right now, since we have plenty of storage between these other piles. And then we can fit a couple of these larger barracks over here. And then with this space, we do have the opportunity to get some rooftop terraces placed up here. But we also need to think down the road when we want to get some more houses placed on top. I've done a little bit of rearranging, and I think this should be a fairly good system. We're going to install 3 of these rooftop terraces. First, I'll need to build these stairs and the platforms over here. And then we have a few more houses that we can build down the road, but we don't need them for now, since we already have 13 unoccupied beds, plus we have another large barracks that's in the process of being constructed. And our beaver population is continuing to explode, so we can pause a couple more of these breeding pods, since we're in a good space right now. But we do need to focus on getting some more food access. I don't think what we have right here is quite enough to sustain us in the long run. And it also looks like we finished building the wood workshop. So now we have access to some treated planks. And I think we also have enough science that we can unlock the irrigation barrier. So right off the bat, let's start placing some of those down right here. And then if we do intend to place some irrigation barriers down along here, we will need to have a water source in this area. And since we have some berries over here that are not picked, plus we have the actual planted berries over here, we can remove some of these ones and then use this as our irrigation zone. And since the irrigation zone from this area will not spread all the way to all our crops, we're going to fit a second one over here because we're not short on berries at the moment. And the one downside to using water wheels is that during a drought, the water wheels no longer produce power. So we are going to have to wait on getting some more metal blocks constructed, but at least we have some in reserve. Plus we really needed the metal blocks in order to build the engine, and we were able to get that constructed fairly quickly. And oh my goodness, we have so many beavers who are unemployed, and we're also running really low on planks. In fact, we are out. I had this building paused since we were maxed out on planks, but now the opposite has occurred. And as we approach the end of the drought, we are completely out of water. So we do need to get this 4th storage constructed now. Let's bump it up on the priority list and then also start unpausing these water pumpers. And then one good thing, if the bad tide does occur in the next cycle, is that it'll probably only last 1 day long. So we won't have to go 6 days without having any water being pumped like we did in this last drought. But we do need to make sure that we have enough water storage. Right now we're pretty much riding the line since we only had 1 at the end of the last drought. And we also have the second area cleared for the water dump, so we can get the levees placed down. And then we can also double up on this area in order to place down a couple more farmhouses. We'll remove at least 1 of them, if not 2. It seems like the amount of farmers that we have is pretty well suited for how many crops we have over here. Oh, and I forgot to unpause the smelter. Bad water has returned since the drought is over. And it looks like we're actually doing pretty good on scrap metal. We're about 3/4 of the way of having it filled up. But we do also need to think about where we want to have a mine placed. These scrap metal ruins are only temporary. Eventually we will run out of these. So we need to figure out where the nearest mine is. Looks like we have one on the backside over here. It's not the easiest to get to, but that might honestly be the closest, if not the only one on this map. Okay, it looks like there is a second one, but this is as far away as you could possibly get. There's some pretty cool overhang structures over here. It'd be pretty cool to continue to build up the dirt, make like a complete dome over the top. So we do need to get all the way over here in order to get a mine established. There's some more ruins over here, so that is good news. But we'll need to get the tube station set up since that makes it much more efficient to travel. The 300% movement buff is very useful. I honestly like it a bit more than the zipline stations, but there are pros and cons to each. This map, it might make sense to use folktales since there is a lot of elevation change and is not as much of a grid, which is where I think the tube stations really thrive. We have our other water dumping station set up. We have a couple more of the farmhouses that are built, and then I got rid of these two. So we even have some more green space for planting. And then I also moved the gatherer flag way over here. And I think this should be enough berries, so we can remove the last of the berries over here and replace them with kohlrabi. It is day 4 of the new wet season, but we are not going up in water as much as I was hoping. We've also increased our beaver population quite a bit, so I think it's time that we start reevaluating where we have all our water pumpers. We can move a few of the water pumpers over here, so they will be taking out of this smaller area since it's downstream and it's not essential for the irrigation of the crops. But then again, the intent is to make it so this water right here is not what irrigates the crops. Instead, we use these water dumps to irrigate the crops, and then we can place irrigation barriers along this part of the shoreline. But until we've placed all these down, it's not super essential that we remove all of these. We'll probably start removing them one at a time as we place these down, and then we also finish constructing these irrigation barriers. It looks like we are running a bit short on planks now, but unfortunately we don't have a whole lot of extra power that we can spare over in this system. We would really need to get a second engine set up, and so I think that's what we're going to have to do. We'll get another lumber mill placed down, and then we can squeeze a second engine right behind here. We'll just need to make sure that we connect it underneath the stairs. And just like that, the beavers have constructed both the lumber mill and the additional engine. And so with all this extra power, it's probably worth moving some of these buildings over here up to this area. So we'll get a couple more of these lumber mills placed down since they're fairly easy to construct. And then we can slowly start turning these ones offline. It does seem that we have this ring of cassavas around here that have not been picked. And then we also have some kohlrabi over here that has not been harvested as well. So we are going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We'll place down a farmhouse up here. And so these guys should be able to access the crops on this side and then help out with some of the cassavas up here. We can always place down some stairs to give them more direct access. And then alternatively, we could lower this area and then fit a second farmhouse over here. It's probably worth placing down some extra kohlrabi while we have the green space available. And then the beavers are starting to work on these irrigation barriers down below. Since we have these 3 water pumps, I removed one of the water pumpers, and then as we increase in our water storage, I'll slowly start turning some of these off. Right now we're in a fantastic space. It's day 10, and we probably have at least 5 or 6 more days until the upcoming event occurs. With my assumption that it is going to be a bad tide, the beavers are slowly making their way through constructing these irrigation barriers. But they have a fair amount that are constructed, specifically the ones up top, so it's protecting a good portion of the cassavas. We are starting to run a little bit lower on wood. As you can see, we've dropped below 100. We do have plenty of trees over here that can be chopped down. And then I did just mark some of these pine trees to be chopped down. We also have some more green space that we can plant some trees. And so getting some oak is not a bad idea since it is the most efficient of all the trees. 30 days to produce 8 wood. And the additional farmhouse over here has been helping out quite a bit. You can see most of the crops have been picked. We just had a bunch of the kohlrabi grow up, and then we have more of the cassavas that are being harvested as well. And as day 13 appears, we have yet another drought incoming, so we've gotten pretty fortunate. We have a bunch of these irrigation barriers that we're working on constructing, but we won't need to worry about them being placed down since the drought is not going to impact us the way that I was expecting. We do need to be worried about water though. Looks like we have 1,000 water in total. We have about 500 extra water that we can store up. So with all of these water pumpers, I'm hoping that we can get those filled up in the next 3 days. And every 3 hours, the woodwork shop produces 1 treated plank. So during a 16-hour day, he can produce just over 5 of these, which is basically 1 irrigation barrier. So to finish this, it looks like it's going to take about 1 more cycle. And then these ones might take just a little bit longer. And as the sun sets on our colony, that's where we're going to wrap up today's episode. We got pretty lucky with the bad tide timing. This is definitely a map where you need to be prepared for a bad tide. And if we are not ready, then we could be facing disaster. So if you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and hit that like button. I really do appreciate it. And I've enjoyed seeing all of your guys' comments on the most recent episodes. And with that, we will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.